while I'm in my revisiting videos era, obviously the other week doing a revisit to the custom art of DNA Digivolving the Olympos XII, I got to thinking about my other video from a couple of years back where I gave full evolution lines to the Olympos XII. So in today's video I want to revisit that concept, but this time with the framing of Digimon Story Time Stranger, giving us one of our best looks into what the evolution lines for the Olympos XII might be. What is up, digital companions? My name is Karn EX and welcome back to another video, and yes, Olympos XII full evolution lines. Now, of course, as Digimon Story Time Stranger itself proves, Digivolution is branching. Warning, of course, this video will contain spoilers to Digimon Time Stranger, and as such, in the game Time Stranger, while of course your individual Digimon can branch, we get a lot of kind of character or NPC Digimon that follow one specific line, and we don't see them deviate. A pertinent example is Ageomon, who, while yes, it does have the different coloured Aegikismon variants, they're more like mode changes for it in the actual game, and you only get to specifically choose evolution lines for an Ageomon if you recruit one that isn't the story Ageomon, instead following a very stereotypical line from Elecmon through to Jupitermon and Wrath Mode. And I think the same can be said of the Olympos XII. There is one member, Marsmon, who I think basically has the most direct evolution line possible. We only don't see one stage. But beginning, of course, with Jupitermon, because it's the one that is most mapped out, I would say, aside from Marsmon later. Of course, when the egg hatches in the human world, it is an Elecmon, a unique Elecmon actually, that's not the same model as the one that you can get as a party member. Then it becomes Ageomon, and potentially all the various Aegikismon, red, green, blue, holy, and dark. Now, in the game itself, again, spoilers, step away now, it's actually Ageomon that warps to Jupitermon, technically with the power of all the other Olympos XII members, plus the agent, which kind of already is Ageomon, a little confusing. So either a warp from Ageomon to Jupitermon and then Wrath Mode, or just considering I think Aegikismon Holy is the sort of most godlike Aegikismon, but honestly any of them apart from Dark is valid here, as Dark is not a potential pre-evolution for Jupitermon in the game. Very quickly getting this out of the way, Coronamon and Lunamon have a designated line each going as far back as Digimon World Dawn and Dusk. These are like very anime style evolution lines designed for these Digimon, so Coronamon to Pheramon to Flaremon to Apollomon, and Lunamon to Lekismon to Cressamon and Dianamon, and then both becoming Grace Novamon. A no-brainer. The first one that's a bit of a head-scratcher is one of the first Olympos XII members we meet, and that is Minervamon. Now, of course, you can also become Mervamon, and indeed does in the plot of Time Stranger, but the only two options for pre-evolutions for Minervamon in the game are Orochimon or Sylphimon, and I see validity to both. Obviously, Orochimon having the snake-like elements of Minervamon and Mervamon, however, Sylphimon preserves Minervamon's fighter/hero vibe, which I think is more important than the snake element. Plus, there's a Sylphimon in Central Town, maybe a cousin to Minervamon. So Minervamon coming from Sylphimon I think makes sense to me. And then honestly it could DNA off Gatomon and Aquilamon, obviously for the 02 reference, which Central Town has a bunch of, from the 02 rookies to the armor quests. But of the two I'd say Gatomon is the main one, as it's the typically more feminine of the two, and of course Minervamon is an overtly feminine Digimon. And then for a rookie, well, probably just Salamon, but Junomon is a scrungly option that I think could be funny, and would also kind of tie around the idea of snakes eating mice, like small mice, starting as an evolutionary stage of a mouse and then eventually ending up as the snake woman Mervamon. Merukimon, interestingly also from Central Town, doesn't give us a ton of indication what its pre-evolutions would have been within the story. Feels like it's been Merukimon for a long time. I think where Garurumon is just far too obvious. In the game, one actually reports to Merukimon, and the visual similarities are vast, to the point I believe there's actually a mod which makes Merukimon blue to resemble Garurumon more. Pandamon would absolutely also be fine, I believe also shows up in Central Town, but I think I prefer Garurumon here of the options that are actually available in Time Stranger. There are of course a bunch of Digimon outside of Time Stranger or that cannot digivolve into Merukimon in the game that I would also choose. For the champion, options become thin. The Garurumon prevos are Lekismon, which is a nice moon connection, Grizzlymon, or Garurumon. Now frankly, I think having 3 Central Town Digimon become Grizzlymon would be hilarious, but let's just stick with Garurumon. But then for the rookie, I think I'd actually go with Tapirmon, just to deviate from using basically the complete adventure Garurumon line. Plus, Tapirmon being holy and having a holy ring is a good setup in my opinion for its fate of becoming a god of Olympus in Merukimon. Okay, moving over to the Abyss area, we have Venusmon, who of course in the text we know digivolved from Shellmon. But Shellmon is a champion level Digimon, which means there must be a gap in between. And you know, as far as Time Stranger evolution evolution goes, there's only one way to directly connect Shellmon to Venusmon, and that's Piximon. So that to me is a very no-brainer. In fact, Piximon being a Shellmon evolution feels a little bit out there unless we of course see it as an evolution line into Venusmon. There are other options I would definitely pick here, but unfortunately they're not available. As far as a rookie for Shellmon goes, I think Shakomon works so well. It's a common Shellmon Prevo, and was the Prevo used in Digimon Survive for Shellmon. Plus, it has a visual similarity to Sangomon, the Liberator pre-evolution for Shellmon. I really wish that something like Mermaimon was available in Time Stranger. Now, of course, Mermaimon would connect more directly to something like an ancient Mermaimon, but given that was an evolution possible in Survive, obviously Shellmon to Mermaimon, would have then been cool in Time Stranger to see Mermaimon become Venusmon. Neptunemon is in a similar spot to Venusmon, as we initially meet its pre-evolution in the narrative in the Abyss area, that being Divamon. But Divamon is an ultimate level, meaning that it doesn't jump 2 levels like Venusmon does. I think for the champion I'd go Celamon. No real reason other than its encyclopedia listing referring to the net ocean, and that it's a data type like Divamon. Not that that matters a ton though, because even Neptunemon is a vaccine. And then a rookie, well, let's just keep the fish and seafood vibes going by making it Crabmon, a very common Celamon pre-evolution and also data type, so it all kind of works in the end. Alright, Marsmon. We know of course its pre-evolution is Grapleomon, because that's where we meet it in the 8 years later part of the story, and we also know that it's one of the Bearmon brothers, so its rookie is a Bearmon. What could that champion be? Like, sure, it could be Leomon or something, but I think it's an absolute no-brainer that it would be Bearmon to Grizzlymon to Grapleomon to Marsmon as a reference to Digimon World 3. As an aside, the other Bearmon brother would absolutely become Grizzlymon and Great Grizzlymon, and then Callismon. Okay, Vulcanusmon, also in the factorial area, has no indication of its pre-evolutions. It kinda ticks me off that Vulcanusmon has 2 Prevos and they're both aquatic, but the one I don't like for them is the one that can Digivolve from Octomon. I guess I can see Dragomon's tentacles becoming Vulcanusmon's arms, but oh well, it's what's possible in the game. And yes, of course I'm using Octomon as the champion. It's red, has many limbs, is holding weapons, it's absolutely ideal. Plus, while it seems a little bit weird that Vulcanusmon can only Digivolve from aquatic Digimon, the aquatic connection actually kind of works, as in Roman and Greek myth, Vulcan and Venus were a unhappily married couple, so that does tie in some water vibes for Vulcanusmon. I've really got no strong feelings on the rookie, but Kamemon is a pre-evolution for Octomon in the game, and that seems most viable to me as its kind of soldier-like helmet at least has some connection to the weaponry vibe of Octomon and Vulcanusmon, but you could also see the helmet evolving into the armored suit of Vulcanusmon. It's a tenuous connection, but this is Digimon we're talking about. Alright, Gear Forest time, and the Lord of the Forest, Bacchusmon. Its pre-evolutions are a little tricky, but I really like that Shogun Gakkomon is in there. They're both big belly boys of a similar-ish color. And Shogun Gakkomon's encyclopedia listing says its special move, Musical Fist, uses its vocal cords and horns to create an ultra-low frequency wave that corrupts the data of its foes. However, these ultra-low frequencies seem to actually improve the health of some opponents. Healing and music/partying is a prominent theme of the Gear Forest, so I think that works nicely. For a champion, I'm gonna go for a Shogun Gakkomon pre-evolution in the game, Vegimon. It's still got a bit of a rotund body, and as the Lord of the Gear Forest, it would make sense for Bacchusmon's Prevo to be made of vegetation. Vegimon's pre-evolution options are also slim, and I would go with Palmon or Floramon here. Both have representation in the story of the Gear Forest already, however I would slide towards Floramon, as Floramon to Vegimon was the evolution in Survive, and the reason I'm relying on these Survive connections is because obviously Habu was originally in charge of both Survive and this game, and there are definitely connections between Survive and this game, things that Habu was thinking about, like including Ceresmon Medium in Survive, etc. Now Ceresmon is really cool, because we do have another pre-evolution just like Neptunemon. Its ultimate level we know is Sirenmon because we encounter them first in the story, and a possible direct pre-evolution for Sirenmon in the game is Kiwimon. It's a bird with green elements, a great champion for Ceresmon and still works really great for Sirenmon. Then for the rookie, well, I also kind of want Floramon. Bacchusmon and Ceresmon having the same rookie would be pretty cool, as they're both Olympos XII members of the Gear Forest. You can just imagine them being best friends, a kind of masculine Floramon and a feminine Floramon that eventually diverged Digivolution. If you don't want to double up though, use Palmon or even Betamon for Bacchusmon. Betamon eventually becoming Shogun Gakkomon isn't bad in my opinion, but personally I'm down for the twin Floramon. Okay, then off in our own little area in the temple is Junomon and eventually Junomon Hysteric Mode. Shakuamon is a choice, but beside it, the only other option that can become Junomon in the game is Anjouamon, which is, yeah, honestly ideal. Very visually similar. For the champion, Gatomon would be obvious for Anjouamon, but honestly, given Junomon has their Hysteric Mode, I think Witchmon would be a really fun choice. An early representation before Mega that Junomon tried to overcome their nature as a witch to become an angel, but that witch tendency, that wickedness remains in given both Junomon's virus attribute and mode change to hysteric mode. And then I suppose I could continue that trend and have the rookie be Impmon. Funnily enough, that then means that Junomon and Jupitermon have a interesting relation to Digimon tamers, Impmon and Elecmon, and of course, Elecmon becomes Leomon, well, not in Time Stranger, but in most media, which would mean in some ways, Impmon and Elecmon would kind of be like Beelzemon versus Leomon, Junomon hysteric mode versus Aegiomon. I like that a lot. You know, whenever I do these videos, people always say, you didn't include this, you didn't include that. Listen, we have talked about 12 Olympos 12 members. The group is very fixed. Until they change the name to the Olympos 13 or something, that's the only members. However, I will relate, as honestly, Time Stranger is one of the closest games to making Plutomon a member of the 12. While they aren't part of the group, they get to be like the 13th honorary member, especially in the finale. So yeah, Plutomon obviously becomes Zombie Plutomon in one timeline, and it digivolving from Ceresmon in its werewolf mode is an absolute no-brainer, both related to the underworld and kind of mixing that Greek-Roman mythology. And then the champion being Dobamon, it was a guard dog, it was an evolution in Survive, but then unfortunately Labramon is not in the game to continue that Digimon Survive connection for Aoi and Labramon. But I suppose any of the Dobamon rookies in this game work, but I'll go Gazimon just to give it some love, and I think visually works very nicely. And while we're here, I'll also talk about Titamon. I didn't talk about in training or babies for this game, but obviously there's a pretty integral part of Time Stranger where we see what Titamon's in training would be, and I think makes it very clear what the evolution line would be from there. Titamon de-digivolves all the way down to a Sunomon, and a really easy line directly to Titamon is Sunomon to Goblimon to Ogamon and then Digitamamon. I considered a few of the other pre-evolutions, like Dark Superstarmon and Skull Greymon, but neither of those can digivolve down to Ogamon, so even if you could find a way back down to Sunomon, I just think using Goblimon and Ogamon here is so intentional. Titamon is a very common Ogamon evolution. It's also kind of cool because Titamon is hunting for the Great Guardian Egg at one point in the game, even though Minervamon calls us an egg thief, so the irony of Titamon digivolving from an egg would be very funny. Also, if we look at Digitamamon, I think it's definitely an intentional evolution of Ogamon in a weird way because it's got those green feet. So that's it, my evolution lines for the Olympos 12. Elecmon to Aegiomon to my personal pick Aegircusmon Holy to Jupitermon and Wrath mode. The fully 100% canon Coronamon to Pheramon to Flaremon to Apollomon, and then Lunamon to Lekismon to Cressamon and Dianamon before both becoming Grace Novamon. I'm gonna say Chumon for Minervamon, going to Gatomon, which DNA digivolves with Aquilomon to become Sylphimon, and then finally Minervamon and Mervamon. For Merukimon, Tapirmon becomes Garuramon and Weregaruramon, and finally the God of Speed. Syakomon then digivolves to Shellmon, over onto Piximon, and finally the beautiful Venusmon. Continuing the Abyss area, Crabmon digivolves to Sealamon, then Divamon, and finally Neptunemon. The Bearmon brothers, Bearmon to Grizzlymon, Grappleomon and Marsmon, and Bearmon to Grizzlymon, Great Grizzlymon and Callismon. Again, Callismon is not part of the Olympos 12. Vulcanusmon, the God of the Forge, coming from Kamemon, then into Octomon and Dragomon, the biggest outlier of this video, before becoming Vulcanusmon. Floramon to Vegemon to Shogun Gakkomon to Bacchusmon, the God of Wine, and also Floramon to Kiwimon, then Sirenmon and Ceresmon. Then Junomon, digivolving from Impmon into Witchmon and then Anjouamon. And as a bonus, the evolution lines of the Titans. Gazimon to Dobamon to Ceresmon in its werewolf mode, and then Plutomon and Zombie Plutomon. Plus the de-digivolved Lord Sunomon becoming Goblimon, Ogamon, Digitamamon, and Titamon, plus Titamon and Skullbalukimon. Let me know your picks for the Olympos 12. Obviously in this video I'm talking specifically about the Time Stranger versions, and as such I'm only using evolutions possible in that game. But if you got ideas outside of it, like from the card game, what the card game seems to indicate, or something that you find just really cool and fun connections, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you to my Sovereign, ZDK14 and Jeremy Babineau, as well as everyone else who supports me over on patreon.com/Karn EX. You guys are phenomenal, and my amazing YouTube channel members here on YouTube. Hope you're enjoying the early access recently, and I'll see you next time when we go digital. Bye bye.